if you involve your kids in those decisions, like, okay, we have to cut back on these things, is it an easy ride? It will not be an easy ride, but you're preparing this kids to be resilient, that life happens.
But another very important thing, that sometimes I think parents sometimes don't understand. You have a good job, you're getting a good salary, you can afford to live in a certain neighborhood. Remember, something can happen to you. And this I'm saying because I have seen, like people, this is especially very common amongst diplomats. You are living in Komarok in Nairobi, and then you made a diplomat. Back in the day, before Kenyan diplomats were forced to take their kids to public schools over here, the kids used to be taken to private schools. So you're here on a tour that's 3 or 4 years, so you bring your child, you go to a private school, ashazoea, and then after that, maybe you go to another country. So for 8 years, this kid has been exposed to a certain lifestyle. And then kazi meisha. Now, you have to take your kid to that school in Komarok. Where do you start? And that's the reason why sometimes when you see, people who are at a certain level of wealth, take their kids to certain schools, you also have to weigh yourself. Is your wealth based on the job that you're currently doing? Or is this generational wealth that you have that even if you died, like this child will still be able to be taken care of? So that's another thing that's sometimes not put into consideration. And then all of a sudden, the parent and the child are now getting into conflict because ulikuwa umezoea soft.
And if it's too confusing, just get another kid. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I think the idea that we're supposed to 100% shelter kids from life is not good, because they will also get into life and realize that this thing, you cannot really be sheltered from it, right? So if you are able to take your kids to private school, do it. Where you get to a point where like private school doesn't work, you have to go to public schools. The idea is you as a parent need to be involved with your child. You will know when they're struggling and you will help them through those things. The other thing, by the way, which is extremely important, is involve your kids in the financial decisions you make as a family for them. Then they will understand. I mean, I remember one day my mom was like, I don't know exactly what we were demanding for, like to get into make a budget. We made that budget. At the end, we were like, whatever we were asking for, actually, but then mommy, the nanny can go. Because we like, your pesa, we stepped up. Because we realized like where the money was going was basic things and very, very few disposable income that we could ask for things. If you involve your kids in those decisions, like, okay, we have to cut back on these things, Is it an easy ride? It will not be an easy ride, but you're preparing this kids to be resilient, that life happens.
But now, you see, one thing that you have to understand, and here I'm talking, like as someone who has experience of attending, like some of those high-cost schools when I came from, like a modest background. And I can tell you what psychologically happens to a child. And to me, at that time, I wasn't really a child. I was like now getting to 18, 19. So I can only imagine if you're like maybe 12, 13 years old. So this is another story that I've never given. Like there was a point, when my mom was so ambitious, nilipokuwa mdogo, and this is sometimes the problem of being an only child. Alikuwa anataka kunipeleka Braeburn, but there are some people who intervened, and I'm happy they did. Because once you start, like engaging in those social circles, that becomes your reality. Like what other kids are saying, that's your world. Kids are talking about going for vacation, like in Gothenburg, Sweden during the summer. Kids are talking about, and those are normal things that they do. Okay. So that becomes your world. Wewe unaishi, I mean, you're not poor, but mnaishi Nairobi West, and you have other people that your parents are are supporting. So psychologically, what you're going to do to this kid when you're taking them here and then you're telling them, guess what? You cannot go to Gothenburg, Sweden, like for your vacation. There's this trip that people are paying, like $100,000. That really messes a child. It really messes a child. And that's why it's very important. It's very important, to gradually, bring in your children into that. Or if you decide that this is where you want your children to be, make sure that you are in a position to afford to take them for a skiing vacation. Like when there's a skiing vacation, and parents are being asked to pay, like 150,000 shillings each for a skiing vacation in a week. Make sure you're in a position to do that.
Set una copa.
Yeah,
From
set una
there.
copa.
Yeah.